So during the past 18 years, both professionally and unprofessionally, I have spent my time, an inordinate amount of time, learning with and in front of children. And what I see when I see a child is I see the future. I see the potential for a better world. I see the potential to change the arc of history. And one of the things that children see is that they want to grow up and become like the rest of us. They want to become adults. And they feel a growing sense of pressure to do that. And we also feel a pressure as adults to make sure that children have what they need in order to be successful in life. In fact, here in the United States, that pressure is strong enough that we do not give them a choice in terms of an education. We actually mandate that all children need to go to school. We protect them with child labor laws and other things so that they can focus on becoming educated, so that they at some point can be more productive, and that they can lead full and happy lives. So in thinking about that, one of the cornerstones for every child's academic career is the ability to read. And this is something that hopefully all of you have experienced something like this with a young child. But there are some things that we're learning about reading that indicate that it brings quite a bit of pressure in most children's lives. And we have fundamentally misunderstood some things about reading, and I want to try to talk a little bit more about today. One of the things that we misunderstood is that we believe that reading somehow is natural. We believe that, like walking and talking, children are naturally going to blossom into readers. All the research that I'm aware of says that this is patently not the case. Reading is not biologically primary. We're not hardwired for it, as David Geary talks about. It is biologically secondary. It is something that takes literally thousands of hours of effort for a child to accomplish. And that effort needs to be systematic. It needs to hopefully be daily. And it's something that children really need to exert themselves to do. And it gives rise to a quote like this: "Some people there are who, being grown, forget the horrible task of learning to read. It is perhaps the greatest single effort that the human undertakes, and he must do it as a child." That's from Steinbeck. So as we start to break down reading into some of the components of it and some of the things that need to happen, we start to recognize that there are a large number of children who are not being successful at the beginning of their careers in reading. So if you want to take a little thought experiment with me here, put yourself in the shoes of a child who goes to kindergarten. A school year here in the United States is 180 days. So for 180 days, a child who cannot read is going to fail publicly in front of peers and in front of a teacher whom he or she desperately wants to please. What happens over time is children, you have the children in front who are holding up their hands and saying, "Please, please, pick me." There is a class of children who begin to actually turn away, who physically try to shield themselves from being asked for an answer. These children will continue to struggle with that for a very long period of time, perhaps throughout their entire lives. We know this both from testing results as well as simply from researchers. One of the researchers, Reed Lyon, measured children who are successful readers versus those who are not successful readers. In 1 year, when children are in middle school, those who are not successful readers will read less than 100,000 words. Those who are successful readers will read over 10 million words. So you start to have 2 orders of magnitude difference in 1 year. And this is by middle school. Many people think of real education happening secondary level or college or graduate school. All the research is starting to coalesce around it happening much, much earlier. And it's something that we need to start to get our arms around. And so with one final example, just to kind of put yourself in the shoes of one of these young children, can you imagine trying to use the internet without being able to read, much less spell? It doesn't have that transformative effect. Being able to really take part in our modern day society, it is requisite that you read. And we have spent billions trying to do whatever we can in America to try to fix this. And you can see up here, this is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It is the only advance. And despite all of our efforts, we still have roughly 1/3 of our children proficient or advanced, 1/3 at the basic, and 1/3 at below basic in 4th grade. And these scores predict future scores. So we are essentially failing 2/3 of our children. Now, I'm not talking about international tests and other things which have a lot of emotion around them, a lot of questions. I'm talking about United States standards that we have had in place since the late 60s and early 70s when NAEP was formulated. We have not seen meaningful gains despite literally trillions of dollars of additional investment. We spend in the United States roughly 2 times what we were spending back in the 80s, and scores have not changed. So just to give you a ballpark figure, we spend between $11,000 and $12,000 per child per year in public school. So that's where our tax dollars are going, and we're not getting enough from it. And so when I look at this, it might strike some of you as somewhat surprising for me to say. Nevertheless, I'm very, very optimistic about what the future holds for our children. And so let me take a couple of minutes and try to explain what that optimism is grounded in. The first thing is technology. Technology is something that I still don't think we have a really good grasp on. We are much more used to things growing arithmetically instead of geometrically. And things that grow geometrically, as you can see, kind of have this runaway effect. They have this very steep curve. And when you talk about computers, you are talking about Moore's Law, you are talking about doubling the power, the number of transistors you can pack on a silicon chip. You are doing that about every 2 years. Modern computers really started with World War II. The war effort really got that going. And we have had, since that time, about 32 doublings. To give you a sense of scale, if you had a single grain of rice and you had 32 doublings of that, you end up with a field of rice. So that's fairly impressive. However, it's the next 32 doublings that coat the earth twice in rice. So if you think that you already have seen dramatic change from technology, we find ourselves right about here in what's called the knee of the curve. We are just starting to see technology go vertical. And so what this means is that we are going to have, and I've heard people talk about this as a new energy source. This energy source can be applied to anything. My personal proclivity is I want to apply it to education. I want to make sure that we take this potential and we harness it on behalf of children. So that is one meta curve or kind of meta trend that gives me hope. Because it tells me that even if we've tried something in the past, we've put technology into schools, we've tried all of these things, the game is changing. And there really is hope that we can do so much more than what we've done before. Another trend that I find extremely encouraging is we are starting to figure out education. We are starting to focus our research to the point where we are making sense of it. We didn't really understand how children learned how to read until we started having the technology to be able to do eye tracking studies and other experiments that really allowed us to see we don't skip words when we read. In fact, we don't skip even one letter. We might feel like we do when we're very fluent, but we don't. We go systematically through and we read and scan every single letter on a page. But we didn't know that. In fact, if you go back to the 80s, there were some very strong words exchanged between various ivory towers talking about who was right and who was wrong. And the data came, and suddenly everyone said, okay, let's do what all good scientists do. Let's adjust our feelings to fit the data and now change our behavior. So in a similar way, we're starting to see that research coalesce around the fact that the leverage is greatest when children are young. So this is from an economist, James Heckman. It's modeled on one of his graphs. This is a very economist way of kind of looking at things. This is the return on investment that you get for investing money based on people's age. And so if you train people on the job or after school, you get, here's your opportunity cost of funds, you get a negative return on your investment. It is a very bad use of our funds to try to be working with people who are this old. Surprisingly and depressingly, depending on who you are, that same negative return is in most of the K-12 space. In fact, maybe just right here in the beginning, first couple years of elementary, do you get a positive return. But here is where you get the strongest return. In the years even before they come to a formal academic educational setting. So, the reason I find this extremely encouraging is, number one, we're starting to understand the mechanisms. We're starting to understand that children who start off publicly failing begin to label themselves as non-readers, start to exhibit print flight, they start to try to run away from reading opportunities, and they label themselves as non-readers and kind of check out of the system. So even though there are opportunities and support structures put in place and all sorts of things that we try to do to lift them up, we have already, in some senses, lost the race by the end of kindergarten, by the end of first grade. The good news, though, is that now that we know this, we can begin to focus our resources on very young children. And those resources are something that we're starting to see line up in that direction. President Obama has been very, very forward in saying we need things like universal preschool. We need ways of helping young children learn. Now, I have my own issues with how people are trying to do it. Because I believe that the way we've been doing it is similar to this thought experiment. We have teachers sitting in fields trying to get a yield out of that, say, acre, and they all have shovels. And we're handing them more shovels and saying we need better yield. We don't need more shovels. We need tractors. We might need some other things. But we need to think about it differently. We need to approach it differently. And we need to support our teachers better in doing that. But it looks like there is a meta trend, at least here in the United States, to start to go younger. And as businesses and politicians and researchers and practitioners are all lining up behind this, it affords a new opportunity. So we're seeing a new possibility for working with the young, and we're seeing technology continue to expand in potential. So, very, very optimistic. Is this just all something in my head? Is this just all potential, or do I have an example? Well, of course I have an example. And being here in Utah, I've selected one right here in this state. So about 5 years ago, the legislature came to us and said, we are concerned. We have children coming to kindergarten not ready to learn how to read. And this is a real problem for us. We are a state whose demographics are very challenging. We have despite Utah kind of having this image of being homogenous, we have children on Indian reservations, we have migrant, we have Hispanic, we have urban, we have very rural settings. We have all of this diversity, and we need to find a way to cost effectively get to these children and help them. And what are we going to do? And so we devised a program to take technology into the home, to have our personalized software go and work with these children 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week. So that's asking them to use it for 75 minutes a week. The concern was, well, these are young children, they're not going to use it. The parents are many times living under stress and are not going to be able to provide a lot of oversight. So the concern was that they wouldn't even be organized enough to really execute this program. And finally, even if they did, all that you have is a computer helping them, how could they possibly learn to read? That's just not going to work. So here's some results. Here's how much they used it. As I said, weekly we were hoping for 75 minutes a week. Well, here's Christmas, so we missed that week. Thanksgiving, spring break. But they used it on average 50% more than we asked them to. And here are the results. So on early reading tests of advanced and beta, they learned 2 to 3 times faster than they would have had than the control did. When you aggregate these results, normal preschool in large-scale studies has been shown to accelerate reading gains by 1 month. We accelerated reading gains 7 months. So we have children entering kindergarten here in Utah, reading as if they were leaving kindergarten. And we do that for about 1/3 of the cost of traditional pre-K. So we are 21 times more cost-effective than pre-K. Now, what does the future hold, though? This is not to talk about that per se. This is much more to say that is an early indicator that we are just scratching the surface. When technology gets involved, 10-fold increases are not uncommon. 100-fold increases are not uncommon. We need to elevate what we're doing. We have not started to change our thinking. Clicking on YouTube videos is not my idea of personalized instruction and what we really want our children to aspire to. That is a misappropriation of the term, the future of technology. We can and we must do better. Our children need it. Our society needs it. Right now, phones are certainly something that people are excited about. They'll get us further, but there is even more. And it's going to require that we focus on the young, that we focus on technology, and that we build the software to connect the potential of that rapidly evolving hardware with the children of the future. Thank you.